Thanks for joining the ISG Smart Talk, IoT Market Landscape and Enterprise IoT Opportunities. This ISG Smart Talk is being recorded, and the link to the replay will be sent to anyone who completes our post-event survey, which you'll be redirected to at the close of this webinar. Feel free to submit a question at any time during the presentation by using the Ask a Question box on the left side of your window. If we don't get to your question during the webinar, or if you're listening to a recording of this broadcast, we'll answer your questions in a follow-up email. Our moderator for today's talk is Jan-Erik Acey, who's the global lead for ISG Provider Lens, has been with the firm almost 6 years, and is based in the US. IoT is one of 8 global studies the ISG Provider Lens has published or will publish in 2019, along with 12 regionally specific research studies that will also be published this year. I'll now turn things over to Jan-Erik for presenter introductions and to begin our webinar.
Great, Jillian, thank you so much, and welcome everyone. We appreciate you attending today and your interest in IoT at ISG. IoT is a great practice, and I'm thrilled to have both Mike Harmon and Vishnu Antari as part of our presenter group today. They represent our practice and will be able to speak about what we see in the market and specifically what clients are telling us. We also have Manali Dibamuk as well as Sachi Jain, who are 2 members of my team, and they are authors of the research study that we recently published that was IoT Transformational Services, Technology Solutions, Platforms, and Industry Consulting and Services. Kind of a mouthful, but IoT is an exciting topic, and we're excited to be able to share some of our insights with you today. I'm going to turn the time over first to Mike Harmon. Mike has been with the firm for 2 years. He is based in the United States. He is the Director of Digital Strategy and Solutions, and he leads our ISG engineering practice and is involved in anything having to do with IoT. So with that, Mike, let me turn the time over to you.
Thanks, Jan-Erik. I appreciate that. So I'm going to talk a little bit here about about the context of IoT. Talk a little bit about some of the, I guess I would call it the origin story. So historically, IT and engineering were able to be fragmented, and IT and engineering had limited interaction with each other, with IT, providing some core services and engineering providing its core services to the business. But as IoT becomes a primary go-to-market force, and Industry 4.0 becomes a primary means of operational improvement, there is a real requirement for convergence to drive digital transformation of clients. So we see our clients changing themselves from product companies, which traditionally would just create a product, take it to market, to much more platform companies that are offering products and services bundled together, but that consumers consume in a very different way than they had in the past. And this is placing IT much closer to the end customers, much higher up in the value stream inside the organization, but more importantly, blending IT operations and engineering all together inside this converged model. And as this change occurs and convergence pushes forward, those lines become extremely blurred that occurred inside those silos before. And this means that the clients have to have digital content from the operations and engineering side inside of any solutions that they bring to the table. And I think, from a provider's perspective, that means that providers have to have both of those things included in order to differentiate some of their offerings. So even in something that would, historically not maybe have engineering or IT in it, there's normally a feed into IoT at some later point. If somebody's making an upgrade to their ERP system, it may be that they're trying to enable some aspect of IoT or transformation inside of the organization. And so that becomes a very differentiating part of any provider's solution. So it's not so much that depth in these areas of IoT helps win deals alone, but rather that all deals, I think, and all interactions begin to have, some of this digital content. And this is a lot of what we're seeing in the marketplace. Because there's not a large number necessarily of IoT transactions, but there's a large number of transactions now that include that, and it really is starting to permeate into every aspect of the client's business. So, in addition to that, this dynamic is really driving the client to move from these fragmented silos to this much more converged landscape, which is a major disruption to them and a major change to their operating model. And so, as we look at how that impacts their operating model, there's a number of different things that come into play. And so, some of the 5 key focuses or 5 key things that we see changing. One change we see is a push away from these decentralized towers, certainly to converged product feature-oriented teams that can operate in a much more agile way. Whereas historically, agile was something that came up through software development. Now it's really starting to permeate all of the different aspects of the business. And as everything kind of becomes productized inside of that organization, enterprises must therefore reorganize themselves to fit around that. For some industries, this is a very natural evolution, and they're able to make that change. But because it's an extension of the thinking that's already present, maybe inside of that enterprise. But for many, this is a major change to tackle and a key obstacle to their transformation. Secondly, we certainly see a shift in technology requirements, particularly in elements of what we would call the digital backbone. So this has been especially true in systems such as ERP, MES, PLM, as the requirements change for connectivity, as the requirements change for analytics and other items of value that we want to extract from those systems. Some of the legacy systems just don't scale, particularly homegrown systems. So a number of enterprises have to look at things that they created themselves years ago, and do they really want to go through and add all that complexity, or do they want to take something that's available out in the market? But in any case, this drives them to have to really evaluate that footprint and that backbone to make changes. Certainly all of this is driving kind of this third trend, which is just the move from products to services. Every organization is looking at themselves and saying, in addition to the products, or maybe in replace of the products, what are the services that we could offer around that product and in that ecosystem? And sometimes it's not just services. Sometimes it's also, how can we monetize the data? And that's really moving those companies to becoming much more platform type companies. This is driving, as we see here in the next item, this is driving a much more complex environment. But at the same time, even though it's a much more complex environment, where the use cases are, more difficult to build, the value proposition is significantly higher. And this all leads for the enterprise to be able to build a much more complete ecosystem. When they're able to sell products, services, monetize data, and produce this entire platform that they can take to market, they're able to then take on and have ownership of the ecosystem that existed around what was to them formerly just a product. And that makes their engagement with the end consumer significantly more intimate and it makes their value proposition to the marketplace significantly higher. So this is really a major driving force in virtually every industry, really in every industry that we operate in. And because this is such a key area that's impacting our clients, and there's deep implications for the clients, there's deep implications for providers and their business, and it's really core to each of those businesses. This has also, of course, been a key focus area for our research team. And so I'd like to take the opportunity to hand things over to Manali from our research team to allow her to talk a little bit about the work that we've done and what we've learned, and share that. Manali?
Thanks, Mike. Hi, everyone. So we will talk about, I will talk about the study that we did. So right now in front of you, you can see the global quadrant in terms of the consulting that we had. So we had different aspects of the IoT market. We had consulting, we had managed services, we had connected cars, we had smart buildings, and we had manufacturing. So I'll try to take you through the consulting piece. So there were certain things that we were looking for in terms of the connected consulting space, and what we were looking for in terms of the service providers who are in this field is more on the advisory consulting or the integration and implementation capabilities that they're doing. A lot of machine learning, deep learning, edge computing, and those areas that they're trying to cover. Product and technology, the strategic consulting partnerships that they have with the different providers in terms of partnering. Edge computing, this is something that has come up newly in this space, but is gaining a lot of traction in terms of the IoT market because of the data that is captured in terms of IoT is huge. So it's always good to process the data where it is kind of getting generated. So that's the reason I think Edge is gaining success with the IoT. And so we were looking at providers who are, how well are they adopting the edge computing services and deployments. Then the regular, we have the big data and the different consulting projects that the providers are taking with enterprise clients. A sufficient quantity and experience mix of all the consultants that the provider has in terms of the implementation strategy and the dedicated resources that they have in the team. So this is what we were looking out for, the consulting capabilities for the providers in the market. So as you can see in the chart, there are about 10 leaders in the quadrant, and some of the elements that we see across that these providers cover. So system integration is the key here in terms of consulting and trying to understand what is the requirement and trying to work out the business case. Then once you understand the business case, the planning, the analysis, the business case development is also the key area here, because the different enterprise clients would have different requirements in terms of their business, in terms of their goals in the organization. So aligning the entire consulting project, IoT consulting project, and getting that connected ecosystem in the relevant client ecosystem is the key here. Technology integration is an important aspect where across the value chain, we need to look at the devices, the platform, analytics, security, everything falls under important aspects here. And I think all the 10 leaders, somewhere or the other, have captured these elements really well in this area. So next I'll talk about the connected cars quadrant. This is the global quadrant that we had, and we had around 6 leaders here. And what we were looking out here in terms of the remote tracking and the vehicle monitoring that to support the fleet management. Then we have the vehicle security services, remote tracking, control, locking systems, and transportation systems. Remote performance in terms of analytics for fleet optimization and cost management also was an area to look out for. Integrated payment systems like tickets, the parking, or the gas parks, maintenance services, these were the areas that we're looking for in terms of the providers serving in this space. And all of the 6 leaders, I think, had some common offerings like a car-to-car communication, which is an important part of the connected car space that has been driving the market in terms of predictive safety and sensor data. Then the smart connected driver system, more on the ADAS side and the driver safety and experience. A lot is happening in the market in terms of the driver's connectivity with the car system and how best it can be monitored in terms of audio, in terms of visuals, or in terms of accessing the different available facilities in the market. Remote route tracking and the vehicle monitoring, fleet management and logistics was also very an area that was covered by all of these providers in terms of the connected car space. We'll take a sneak peek of the connected cars quadrant, which we had in the US region as well. The last one was more on the global perspective. This is on the US quadrant. Here we had 5 leaders, and apart from the criteria that we had for all the connected cars providers, the focus here we saw among the providers who are listed as leaders here was on vehicle digitization, automation, connectivity space. A lot of domain expertise, and people are working on more ideas, more improvement areas, and a better connectivity system. Number of domain experts also is an important aspect. A lot of customer support is required in terms of the area and the connected cars. So these were the aspects that all of the leaders were good, and they were placed leaders in this quadrant. So after taking you through the quadrant, I'll just talk about the general trends that we have seen in the markets in terms of the IoT market. So the enterprise clients, I think, now together works with the service providers because a lot of collaboration is required in terms of technology integration, more business-focused outcomes, and thus the real-time use cases are very important. And I think both the providers and clients are together taking this transformation journey where they're working around and understanding what would be the best fit in the organization in terms of the cost, the positive ROI, or the reduced risk, and the transfer of the legacy systems, which is very important because each organization may have an historical legacy system, and to fit into the connected ecosystem along with their legacy data and legacy system is a key area here. So consulting plays a primary role here in terms of understanding the requirements. Then we see in this IoT market, there's a lot of acquisitions, mergers which happens, and which is a key here because not everyone can provide everything. Strengthening the existing digital portfolio and with the right partners is the key here. So the providers are doing that very well in the market, and the competitive, more partnership, mergers and acquisitions are happening in this area. A lot of M&A is happening in terms of the software application space, and there are larger deals that are happening on the hardware area as well. We see a lot of convergence in terms of blockchain, AI, and edge computing. At least one of these part of investments are happening all with the enterprise clients. AI is the one that gives the intelligence behind this. Blockchain is a lot important for the secure data transactions through a decentralized framework. And edge analytics, also real-time data visualization and predictive maintenance are important in this space. And I think every provider today or the clients are investing in these areas. Cybersecurity, again, is the most important area here. It's gaining importance, but still I think the market is soft there, and a lack of comprehensive framework is still there. But things are getting there. It's getting adopted. Providers are getting more and more into security frameworks and that is helping them, which previous were a barrier in terms of deployments, but now with the security frameworks in place, it is getting better. A secure data transfer and payment, which have been the primary challenges, are now getting resolved. Application of blockchain and edge are reducing these vulnerabilities, and the risk and the large volumes of data that is also getting reduced with edge computing. So cybersecurity is gaining traction, and I think it is one of the key areas to look out for with more and more connected ecosystems getting into place. Investments in terms of the IoT market is growing. We see big names in the industry, Microsoft, Google, Cisco, to name a few. They are funding different startups and a lot in the area of software, applications, hardware, sensors even, and platform spaces. So a lot of investments are happening because in some of the areas, maybe even startups are gaining a lot of traction with specialized area of their work. So those services, those applications are also important, and a lot of investments are happening there. We see a different mix of pricing models. Traditionally, if we see the engineering services, it comes with an T&M kind of model, but now with IoT coming in and more requirements, as Mike also mentioned, it's more of a converged market that is happening. So a lot of pricing model change have been happening in this area. We see a lot of risk-reward kind of models or outcome-based models, and along with hybrid models. So hybrid models are also gaining a lot of traction in the market in terms of an adoption or a mix of different pricing models that one provider can offer. And lastly, I think the clients and service providers are together collaboratively working on these areas, because for a better ecosystem or a better connected ecosystem, it's very important to understand and deploy accordingly. So the adoption of the working models is very important here. So service providers are helping the clients in their digital journey, and in return for their better return and efficiency. So adoption may vary or is varying with different industries and functions and technology, but the use cases that together the providers and clients are working on, they are driving the best results in the market. So that's from my side in terms of the global and the US market. I will switch it on to Shachi, who will take you through the UK and the Nordics region. Thank you.
Thanks, Manali. So as we speak about the IoT market in Europe, Europe has been witnessing a significant growth in IoT domain, and many of the use cases and the proof of concept have been scaled to live implementation. Some of the more mature markets that are showcasing increased IoT adoption are UK and Germany. They are more mature markets, and Nordics is an emerging region, and it is witnessing a lot of traction in this domain. So we did the same 5 quadrants for the UK and the Nordics region. So let me just showcase one of the quadrants that we did for the UK region. We did this quadrant for the manufacturing vertical. So it basically compares the capabilities of different providers in IoT solutions and services for manufacturing vertical. We had identified 5 leaders in the area in UK region, and 2 of them are actually headquartered within Europe. So primarily the reasons that these companies have been adjudged as leaders are their deep domain expertise in manufacturing vertical and a comprehensive portfolio of services. There is a widespread partner ecosystem which can complement their existing solutions and services and offer the exact solution as required by the client is an important criteria. And having a strong ecosystem of partners actually helps in scaling the IoT implementations and providing the services as required by the client. Also, we looked at the use of emerging technologies like AR and VR, which is driving the digitalization of production ecosystems. So within manufacturing, AR, VR technologies are being leveraged are being demanded as well by the manufacturing clients to improve their production processes, to help them run maintenance and repair of the systems of the shop floor devices, and also improve the shop floor experience, shop floor production systems, and in general promote the overall connected ecosystem within the manufacturing vertical and overall manufacturing process. Then as we move on to the Nordic region, the quadrant that I have picked over here to showcase is the smart buildings and infrastructure. Quadrant. Here we have again compared capabilities within building automation, energy efficiency, energy management areas for the providers. There has been an increased focus on building automation and smart infrastructure in the Nordics, because these are the smaller scale projects which will act as building blocks for capital intensive large smart city initiatives. We identified 3 leaders in this domain, and one of them is based out of Nordics. The key strengths that the leaders showcased are again deep domain expertise, but here we also looked at the experience mix of the consultants when in terms of their consulting capabilities as well as the implementation capabilities. Nordics as a region is highly focused on security. So that is another area where we compared the capabilities of different service providers. Within Europe, in general, cybersecurity has been an area of interest for the enterprises before they embark on their IoT journeys, and Nordics is highly sensitive region. And it is important for the service providers to showcase their strong capabilities in data security, infrastructure security, network security, as well as cloud security and device security. And it has been an important criteria for success in this region. Then Nordic region being a very emerging market, the enterprises are looking for strong customer references, and they want to be able to have confidence in success of the IoT implementation. So strong customer references are another area that leaders showcased, and enterprises are actually looking for tangible results. So they want to go for providers who have experience in live IoT implementation and not just proof of concept. Then, so these are the quadrants that we did at a regional level. Now, just to showcase a few trends within Europe, again specifically for the UK and the Nordic market, I will first speak through the trends that we witnessed in the UK market. The clients in UK are looking for transformation which is enabled and underpinned by IoT, and there is an increased focus on scalability and flexibility of the IoT implementation. There is within manufacturing, as manufacturing is one of the early adopters of IoT, there is focus on predictive maintenance, and cybersecurity, importance of cybersecurity just cannot be emphasized enough. So some of the key trends that are helping the growth of IoT within UK are the 5G rollout and the narrowband IoT. These are the low-cost technology and high bandwidth high network bandwidth, which are helping the enterprises and the providers to improve IoT connections and improve IoT network availability. So it helps the providers and the enterprises in delivering the real-time data analytics leveraging edge. There has been an increased demand for advisory services because enterprises are heavily investing in IoT, but they're still wary of the complexity, and they want service providers to act as their partners and take them through the journey, advise them, and provide hand-holding throughout their transformation, which is underpinned by IoT. And they are looking for technical partners. So they look for service providers as well as technical partners who can offer the to-the-point solution which will solve their exact problem. Then UK, within Europe, in general, the cybersecurity initiatives are driven by the government, and enterprises are highly sensitive to security breaches, especially data theft. Within UK, the governments are actually wary of the state-led attacks which are launched by hostile governments. With UK government has also launched a code of practice for consumer IoT security as part of its Secure by Design initiative to ensure that the security is embedded within the device. The devices are embedded with the security modules in order to have that first layer of secure connection within the sensors. And again, the IoT deployments are so complex that enterprises do not want to take on the entire risk, and they want to, as they are looking for advisory partners and technical partners, they also want them to share those risks. So there is an increased focus on risk-sharing models when it comes to IoT contracts. They are looking for risk pricing models which actually share the risk equally or at a higher percentage between the enterprises as well as the providers. Then if you look at the Nordics region, the Nordic region is significantly increasing its spend on IoT. And again, the government is driving the implementations and they are investing in IoT projects. There is a Nordic Smart City Network project where the governments are collaborating to develop the best practices for IoT deployments and have a knowledge sharing going on so that all the 5 countries within Nordic region are at par and are leveraging the best-in-class technology. The enterprises in Nordics, because they are late to the game, they are completely looking for achieving commercial success, and they are looking at IoT beyond POCs. They want successful live implementation. Then the focus is on within manufacturing. Manufacturing across Europe has been a front runner, and Nordics is not an exception. Focuses on connected industrial processes, and they are looking at connected shop floor and connected industrial processes to promote insourcing. They are looking for a connected system between their suppliers, their customers, their third-party companies. And again, there is a heavy investment in national security infrastructure, not just at different country levels, but at a regional level. The enterprises they have announced plans to invest in national security infrastructure, and it is important for the service providers to showcase their IoT security capabilities if they want to win large IoT transformation projects. And the IoT transformation projects are not just underpinned by the private sector. The public sector is an equal participant in these IoT implementations. And embedded IoT security in devices and sensors, endpoint security and protection for the sensitive data are some of the key areas where service providers need to keep themselves up to date and be compliant with the cybersecurity requirements of IoT projects in this region. With that, I would hand it over back to Jan-Erik.
Thanks, Shachi. We are getting a number of good questions coming in, and so I think that I'll just remind everybody that if you want to ask questions, go ahead and type them in, and we'll get to as many as we can. We already have quite a few coming in, so we'll start to address those. So I think the first question, Mike, I'm going to direct it to you. The question revolves around, have you seen any themes or any common practices that are leading to success? IoT is new enough, but we are already seeing some success. There's many case studies and good examples out in the market. So with all of those that you're seeing, can you name some of them that you think are key to the success that our clients are seeing?
Well, I think I think some of the key themes for success for our clients around IoT, relate for their ability to go through and adopt the change. And I think we all tend to look at that change as technology based, and I think that's a fair assessment. There's certainly a heavy technology component to it, but at the same time, one of the primary drivers in that change is really the operating model. So the clients have to adjust themselves from operating in somewhat independent, unconverged silos into this much more converged model. So how their departments, how their teams interact with each other, how they support each other, how they engage a partner ecosystem, who those partners are, all becomes significantly different. And that really is where they get where companies tend to get stuck. is much more in the operating model and the culture piece of it. So typically, when we when we come in and we're interacting with clients, they see that they're having some struggle and some issues, getting their IoT initiative off the ground, and they want to understand, maybe some of those technical aspects of it, or how should they work better with service providers. But it's really their own internal operating model and their own internal cultural changes that they have to contend with to be successful. And so I think that the folks that are able to win best in this area are those that really take a deep focus on, this isn't just a change in how we deliver products to the market. It's a fundamental change in how the entire business operates. They look at that and they embrace that digital transformation that must occur across their enterprise.
Great, thank you. Second question, Sachi, I think this is a follow-up to maybe your slide on the UK that you mentioned. One of the points was the risk-reward model is happening. So the question that's come in is, how are the service providers managing the risk-reward model effectively, considering challenges in terms of metrics? And I'll let anybody else join in as well. But Sachi, why don't you begin and just talk about what you saw, at least in the UK market, from the risk-reward models?
Sure, Jan. So when as the complexities of IoT deployments are increasing, service providers are adopting. Initially, there was little hesitation on part of the service providers in sharing the risk with the enterprises, but having these kind of models in place actually enables the providers to co-innovate with their clients and also own the IP for the solutions that have been developed. So they are not shying away from adopting the risk reward model. As far as managing it effectively is considered, they don't look at it as a challenge but as an opportunity to collaborate and co-innovate well with their clients.
Anyone else want to comment? Yeah, sorry. Anyone else want to comment on that? All right, let me go on to the next question. Manali, you mentioned manufacturing, connected car, and buildings as three industries or areas that were a focus in the report that you were the lead for. What are the other industries that you see as having some advancements in IoT? And can you speak a little bit about what we know about the other industries?
Absolutely, Honorik. So manufacturing is the biggest area, I think, in terms of the IoT implementation. That is something that we cannot, so IoT comes along with manufacturing. We cannot take that away. But other important industries are healthcare. Healthcare is a major industry because there are a lot of elements to that industry. There is medical devices, there is hospital infrastructure, there is patient management, so a whole lot of holistic elements that are available in that particular ecosystem. So we did healthcare last year, and we found out that addressing healthcare as a whole is difficult because there are different subsegments to this area, and a lot is happening there. Trust me, I think the providers are working along in different areas. A lot of that in terms of the results. So there, healthcare is one. We did give short that retail. So I think retail is growing. The world and Walmart. But I think the connected ecosystem is getting more and more important there, and more innovation are coming over into that area. And again, with others, smart building, we see a lot of smart.
Manali, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're not getting a good.
I think they are also getting a lot of action in those areas. So apart
Manali,
from
Manali, sorry to interrupt you. We're having a hard time hearing you. Maybe.
Healthcare and retail are areas that gaining a lot of traction. What's going on, I think?
Okay, Manali, sorry, your connection was very good. So we may need you to check that before we ask you another question. No.
Can you hear me now? Am I clear?
No, Manali. Let's. Why don't you check your connection and we'll ask you another question.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go on. Sorry about that, everyone. I have another question here. What are the key elements of this new converged operating model? Maybe, Mike, I think that refers to what you were talking about. So let me have you take that question, please.
Sure, and we actually have a slide here towards the appendix here that relates to that. So as I had talked about, one of the things that leads to success is certainly understanding some of those industry-specific use cases. Each industry has to approach this problem differently. So the operating model from one industry to the next tends to be differentiated. So one of the areas for success, I think, is for the clients to be able to go through and look at what's happening in their industry and what makes sense for their particular use cases for their industry, and drive towards that as a means to be able to execute. So I think that's one of those elements. Certainly, the other one is what I had talked about previously, which is being able to break apart those silos and create a converged model. Typically, folks are doing that through product aligned delivery by going through and organizing themselves around products or feature teams, and that tends to be the means by which they accomplish that goal of kind of disrupting those silos by creating pods and squads, and that tends to work fairly effectively. They have to be very focused on collaborative partnerships. So, one of the things that we've been talking about here also is the maturity in the sourcing model. A lot of enterprises, as they make this move, are trying to answer the question of, what is really core to them in this new converged model versus what isn't. And many of them are erring on the side of saying, all of this new way of operating is going to be very core to me, so I'm going to bring in resources and ramp it up. So we see a pretty significant amount of T&M work that's happening. But there is a long-term push towards risk reward. But in order to do that and bring that online and mature it, there really has to be some sort of collaborative partnership ecosystem that they need to be able to build from a hardware side, from a services side, and really from a complete solutions aspect. And again, that also is very industry specific, as is the rest of this. So, and certainly being focused on delivering outcomes and then measuring to those outcomes is another key element. They can no longer kind of operate in the traditional waterfall development of achieving an end product alone. When they start to when organizations start to get themselves into the mode of providing services and providing data and monetizing data, they have to really start to focus on what are the outcomes that they're providing to their consumers, and what are the outcomes of their teams that they're able to take to market that are sometimes in this new model a little bit less converged. So I think that somewhat encapsulates it. Jan Erik.
Yeah, adding on to that, Mike, you mentioned something about the connected industrial process, and the question goes on to say, do you see clients actually investing in these capabilities rather than just depending on their providers, sourcing it from the service providers? So what's the investment that we see on the client side?
Yeah, I think the investment at this moment on the client side is fairly strong because they see it as such a key differentiator for their business. They are investing in that pretty heavily. But at the same time, a number of them are starting to see that, there's certain aspects of this that maybe don't make sense for me to own long-term. And to some extent, we're seeing some of them already start to contemplate the idea of transferring that back. Another slide I think that kind of helps maybe tell some of that message is just kind of looking at the maturity model that we see. So we see a lot of activity today on the left of this, and we see the clients building that themselves because they believe that it's core, but at the same time they're starting to see core elements of it. So if you're an automotive company and you're building an autonomous driving solution, as an example, you believe that that's very core to you. So you start out building and setting that up entirely in and of yourself. But at some point you come to the realization that the various pods inside of that are providing different aspects of that solution are really not necessarily core to you. They're core to the end solution, but they're things that you don't necessarily need to provide. And so you start to move, clients are starting to move to the right. And in all honesty, many of them are kind of jumping past the managed service to somewhat more of a risk reward, where they're looking at co-development and co-location of IP development inside of these solutions. So they're taking various aspects out to a provider, or trying to migrate to that provider, and then they're putting onus on innovation inside of the provider's ecosystem to come back and provide that reward.
Great, thanks, Mike. Another question, and we apologize that we couldn't hear Manali answer the question about the industries, and we have another question specifically about that. But Sachi, let me ask you this one first. What are some of the major use cases and the investments that you saw in the UK region? What were the providers telling you about? Sort of talk of the difference between, are there just use cases, or are we actually seeing case studies? And how do you believe the investment is happening in the UK compared to what Mike was just talking about?
So, sure, Jan Erik. So UK now it has moved beyond POCs and use cases. Manufacturing being the early front runner, there have been multiple implementations within manufacturing, and then there is the manufacturing companies, they are leveraging IoT to develop digital systems, improving shop floor processes. They are increasingly looking at IoT-enabled automation to digitalize the production, to integrate their suppliers, customers, and other third parties. So this is where the service providers have been implementing live projects, and preventive maintenance has been the first ever use case which has moved into large scale implementations everywhere within manufacturing sector. Then data analytics is another growth area within this domain, because manufacturers are looking for enterprise level decision making capabilities to ensure that their business processes are at par with their peers and the industry, and they're leveraging best in class processes. The other areas where the use cases have moved beyond to live implementations and are the connected vehicles. The UK Department for Transport, for example, is conducting advanced trials for autonomous vehicles, and usage-based insurance, vehicle diagnostic, predictive maintenance, and vehicle platforms are some of the areas where enterprises are implementing the solutions, and there is an increased demand from service providers to provide these solutions at a scalable and flexible manner.
Great, thanks, Sachi. Mike or Vishnu, next question, and maybe Vishnu, why don't we hear from you first, and Mike, you can weigh in as well. As you work with your different clients, obviously, Mike, you spoke about the need for change, and change management is something that we can't ignore in this space. So the question is, how to implement change management for wider adoption of IoT? Vishnu, why don't you talk first about your experience in Europe, since you're based there, and then Mike, why don't you weigh in on what you're seeing, if there's any difference for the U.S. market?
Sure. Thanks, Jan-Erik. And definitely one of the most difficult topics to handle here. But we are seeing companies handling this in a couple of ways. So a few things which come to mind. Of course, as Mike explained, IoT is essentially a system level challenge, which is kind of exposing the different silos within IT business and different operating functions. And one of the ways to handle this is, of course, getting a neutral advisor into the game, which can kind of tie these pieces together. So that's definitely going in bringing the change management inside. We have seen even better cases where the advisor pulls in the third-party system integrator also early in the game, in the form of, let's say, running some innovation challenges or request for solution, as we would like to call it, because those kind of, bringing the providers early in the game, thinking about scale, kind of helps them, think about the solution in the long run. So that's definitely one of the change management strategies that we look here. Yes.
Mike, anything to add to that from a U.S. perspective?
Yeah, I think one thing that really differentiates between success and failure from a change management perspective is understanding and not underestimating the gravity of the change. So when there's some clients that we've interacted with, that are looking at perhaps an industry 4.0, which is a use case of IoT, an industry 4.0 transformation of their manufacturing footprint, as an example, and they'll come at that with the approach of, well, this is the next lean, right? This is the next thing that's happening, which is really a bit dismissive to the gravity of the change that they need to undergo. So I think there's a tremendous amount of OCM messaging that has to happen to help people really understand that there is a fundamental business transformation that's going to occur. And I think the organizations that master that really do change the mindset, and then the organization, the people in the organization start to operate, as if it were muscle memory. It becomes very natural to them, the change that they're experiencing. And then, the POCs and all the other activity that they'll undertake becomes a much more natural flow. So I think there's a heavy, very traditional, to some extent, traditional aspect of OCM that has to occur inside an organization. And we're seeing the clients that are most successful, we're helping them design target operating models. They're also, having us help them with an OCM aspect. And I think that leads them to get down the path quicker. But I also think that leads to them to, be able to do things in a much more mature way that prevents them from just creating a handful of POCs that don't scale. To really get an initiative that rolls out and scales and turns into something, they have to have that OCM aspect.
Great, thank you. The next question revolves around the talent crunch and the skills such as IoT, blockchain, cybersecurity, and the need for those. And certainly all of you have emphasized how important that is to the clients and the steps that the providers are taking to be able to provide that. So the question is around, are the service providers able to fulfill the demand around such services? And if yes, then is it through more reskilling of existing employees or through subcontracting? So I want to divide this question in two. Manali, we'll try and see if we can hear you again. Will you address this from what you heard from the service providers? Do they feel that they are being asked to fill in for those skills? And then Mike, why don't you answer it from the client side? Are the clients feeling prepared through reskilling, or do they find that they are outsourcing most of the skills needed for that? So Manali, why don't we have you answer the question first?
Thank you, Anurag. Am I audible now?
You sound better. Yes, keep going.
Thank you. So yes, of course. I think I've been talking throughout with the service providers, and it's a great crunch in terms of the new technologies that is passing on to the IoT ecosystem. The talent is very important, and reskilling is what I'm looking more in terms of this market. I mean, the providers are repeatedly telling that reskilling their existing resources has become the key in terms of the success of these IoT deployments and implementations. So a lot of trainings and a lot of adoption is happening in terms of reskilling their employees, and that has been the most important part for the providers in this market. Yes.
Thanks, Manali. So Mike, as you consider it, what are you hearing that the clients are choosing to do? Obviously, when they're talking to you, they're thinking of outsourcing something, but are they talking about keeping a certain amount of it in-house and relying on providers for other, or is it heavily weighted on their reliance on the providers?
Well, it definitely is heavily weighted on the reliance of the providers, but there's a dynamic in there I'd like to unpack, because when they are reskilling their own workforce. They're making massive investments in training and trying to execute on that, but they still have a lot of legacy business that they need to push forward. And I think clients, more so than the providers, see their ability to reskill their workforce as limited. I think the providers are better positioned. I guess I would say the providers are better positioned to reskill a workforce because it's a part of their DNA. It's not necessarily a part of a client's DNA to go through and reskill a workforce. In the evolution of a provider, they've gone through and done some of that in the past. So the client's not having a complete ability to transform their workforce and having this come at them very fast, right? Because they're still on annual budget cycles. They even if they go to the market to try and bring in resources, they definitely feel that they can't do that quick enough. So one of their initial reactions is to go to the provider for talent with the long-term plan that they're going to hire on and build more of that talent internally. But they see themselves adding on and building that talent internally by hiring it. And so almost all the clients that are going through this transformation have some reskilling effort. They also have a larger talent acquisition effort that they're going in and trying to bring in and recruit those folks. but then they're almost always relying heavily on the providers. And when you think about them doing all three of those things, to be honest with you, it's a bit chaotic and it's a bit disorganized. And I think there's a real opportunity for providers to help their clients, really reposition that model and start to say, well, let's look at what the end state's going to be, and let's really start to think about and move in that direction, because we as a provider can reskill our workforce, and maybe you're going to add more talent than what you needed in the first place. And what are some of those core elements? What are some of those pods and squads that maybe make sense for us to execute? And we're seeing that in our engagements with the clients, right? It becomes the talent question and the talent problem drives the target operating model discussion, and it becomes, the target operating model becomes a key solution to that in time.
Great, Mike. Thank you. So we're just past the top of the hour. Mike, Vishnu, Manali, and Shachi, thank you so much. We appreciate your insights and the experience that you're able to share with us, both from the provider side and the client side. For those interested, the Provider Lens study on IoT is available on ISG's website. Just look under research and Provider Lens, and you'll find access to the study, and any other questions you have about it, you'll be able to answer through the website. We're going to turn the time back over to Jillian to wrap up. Thanks for everyone's attendance today, especially for the great number of questions that we got. I don't think we, unfortunately, could get to all of them, but we will get answers out to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jan-Erik. This does conclude our time today. Thank you so much for joining this ISG Smart Talk. As mentioned, we will be sending the replay to anyone who completes the post-event survey, which you'll be redirected to shortly. If you'd like to speak with any of our presenters, please reach out to us at www.isg-one.com. Thanks very much for listening.